Hello, and thanks for coming back. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is diction, and more specifically about consonants. In a previous video, I talked about vowels and how the vocal sound is really carried on those various vowels to shape and give color to the voice. But consonants make it possible for us to understand words. And so much of our singing is about text and conveying those ideas. So it's really important to understand how each of the sounds that we call consonants are formed and what control we have over what they sound like, how strong, how clear, how delicate, how elegant, any number of qualities that you can bring out in your singing through the way you approach the consonants. Linguists have categorized the various consonants into groups that describe how those sounds are made, and also into whether they are voiced or unvoiced. Any sound that is considered voiced means that it has a pitch associated with it, because the vocal folds are vibrating on a pitch while you say that consonant. Whereas an unvoiced consonant is just air. It doesn't have any pitch. All right, so in thinking about how all these sounds are made, we want to think about what we use to make those sounds. And those are termed the articulators. And actors have a warm-up they use where they say the lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue. And it's a good way to get those articulators moving. The lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue. And one thing you want to always bear in mind, again, anything having to do with singing or performing, is to have the right amount of tension for making these sounds. We don't need to tighten up the jaw, for example. And we don't want to do that because that can interfere with the quality of our sound. So think about getting the tip of the tongue to be very flexible and free. Kind of stretch the tongue. Think of releasing any extra tension. And the lips as well. We have all these muscles in the face, and we want them to be free and flexible and pliable, not tight or held. But there are different things you can do, like jutting your lips as far forward as possible with a nice big hum. And do that a few times and really think of releasing all these muscles and letting them stretch and lengthen. And even the opposite then, like stretching outward, out, forward, keeping everything loose. So you have the tongue, you have the lips, and then the teeth, which are stationary. Then you have the gum ridge, which is behind the upper teeth, and that's known as the alveolar ridge. And the tongue can go up and press against that alveolar ridge, and that's where some of the consonants are formed, as we'll see as we explore. So we'll jump right in and talk about plosives. Plosives are sounds that come out of a breath pressure, a moment of breath pressure that is then released. We have unvoiced and voiced plosives. The unvoiced plosives, as you can see, are P, T, and K. And they come out P, T, K, without any voice, without any pitch. Then their equivalent sounds, which are made in the same place, are B, D, and G. Now let's think for a moment about how these different sounds are made. The P is the result of the lips coming together and forming a little bit of pressure until the breath is then released. So try that. P, p. And notice that the same breath that you work with in your singing, of course, is the breath that propels all of these consonants. So think about letting these emanate from the deepest part of the torso. P, p. Then you have the T, where you have the tongue coming up to that alveolar ridge behind the upper teeth, t, and forming a little pressure, t, until the breath is released. Now the K is the back of the tongue really coming up against the soft palate. K, k. Now if you move over to the voiced column, you see the consonants are formed in the very same ways as their partners on the unvoiced column, but this time you just add your voice at the same time, and then there will be a pitch. So you have back to the p, 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 b, b, for the B. Going to the t, t. If you keep your tongue in the same place, but you add your voice, it's D, D, D. And the same thing then with the K, 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 silent, and add the voice, g, g. It becomes a G. And bear in mind, when you have those plosives, you just get one shot at it. So you want the energy to be focused. So when you're singing a word and the consonant is either at the beginning or the middle or the end of the word, you want that sense of focused breath pressure. Not too much tension, but certainly enough good tension and energy so that those consonants will come out clearly and travel all through the hall. Our next kind of consonant is known as the fricative because it's caused by friction. There's a continuous sound that's produced. It isn't like the plosive where it just stops after that initial sound. It continues as long as you have breath to feed the sound. So let's look at the various fricatives. There are again unvoiced and voiced, and they tend to partner up depending on how those sounds are formed. So the unvoiced fricatives. The first one, F. And again, that can happen at the beginning or the end of a word or in the middle, like find or cough. Then underneath that we have the TH sound, as in think. And so the F was formed by the upper teeth sitting down on the lower lip. Then you have the TH, where it's the tip of the tongue coming out through the teeth. Then you have the S, which is the tip of the tongue up on that alveolar ridge. And there's pressure there. Then you have the SH sound, shh, which is kind of a combination again of that alveolar ridge and the tongue, shh, a slightly different placement between S, shh, and shh, SH. And the lips even come in and kind of curve a little bit. Now coming across to the voiced column, you go right back to where that F was formed, and now if you add your voice to it, it becomes V. So try that. Do F and then V. And I think it's interesting to note that there's a different amount of breath required when you add the pitch. You might notice you can't push quite as much air through the opening. You have to balance it in a certain way. And a V is actually a good way to warm up the voice, to get everything kind of centered and focused, keeping that breath pressure steady in the articulators and also in the voice, in the vocal folds. Go now to the TH. There's the TH with no voice, like in the word think, and then start the word these, and notice there's a pitch there now. It's hard to keep that steady. Does not require a whole lot of breath, just a nice, stable, steady breath. Now go to the S, the unvoiced S, and its partner, which is the voiced Z. Formed in the same place as the S, but with a different amount of breath pressure and with the vocal folds coming in on a pitch. Now go back to the SH in shake or caution, and then add the voice, and you have zh, like vision and Asia. Zh. And finally we have the H, which is unvoiced. And as you notice, that is just simply the vocal folds coming closer together, but not so close as to form a pitch, but a little bit closed, so you hear that H sound. And notice again, all of these sounds, these fricatives, they will continue as long as you are sending breath into that sound. Our next category is the nasal. There are 3 nasal consonants. When you put your lips together, you get the M. If you put your tongue, the tip of the tongue, up against the alveolar ridge, then you get the N. And finally, you have the eng, otherwise known as an NG. And that sound is basically formed where the K sound happens. Again, the back of the tongue going up near that soft palate. K. There's another set of consonants known as the approximants. I think that's a great word. So they are consonants. They aren't necessarily just vowels, but in some cases they act like vowels, in that it's about air flowing through an opening, a specific shape, but still open, not having so much of the breath pressure that we've talked about with those other kinds of consonants. So the first of these approximants that we'll talk about is the L. It's known as a lateral liquid consonant. The tongue is in a lateral position from side to side, and because nothing is closed at any point, the air is just flowing actually around the sides of the tongue. So explore for just a minute how you can let an L sound happen with as little tension as possible. Remember that the tongue is a muscle, and if we are overworking that muscular nature of this activity, it will interfere with the singing or make it harder, or it might give kind of an edge to the sound, or sometimes the L can creep in early and corrupt the vowel. So you always want to keep in mind that you want the tongue to be very free. And I like to think of the word neutral. If you think of releasing any work that the tongue is trying to do, and just think instead about a flow of breath that's occurring, that really can help to ease any extra tension that might try to creep in. So, love that L. L. Okay, then we have other vowel consonants, so-called, because they almost act like vowels, even though they are consonants. For example, you have the R. It's almost just like a schwa, just like that neutral vowel that shows up all over the place. And just try saying the word rose as rose. Core. Americans tend to have a very hard R, like core. And as singers, we want to be aware of that tendency and not do that hard R, but let it be more like the schwa. Then we have what are known as glides, and those again are consonants that really act like vowels, as in w, the W, which is almost like an oo. It's not quite all the way to that vowel oo, but it glides through it kind of quickly. So wander, wander. You could say wander, but that's a little too much. But there has to be something there. So wander, wander. Then y, as in yes. That is the glide, which is written in IPA as a J, but it's the y sound. And it acts a little bit like the E vowel, but again, not all the way there, but gliding through it. Bayou. So it's important to be aware of these sounds and knowing that, for example, let's say we were singing together the word bayou. Really, it's a two-syllable word, but it has a lot of diphthongs in it. Bayou. We would have to be really clear on the fact that we are sustaining that primary vowel, which would be the ba, and then you would happen very much at the end of that first syllable and moving quickly through the E sound, bayou, and going straight to that next important vowel, which is the oo vowel. Then moving on, we have the unvoiced glide, which is the wh sound, which, whether. And it's really kind of like blowing out a candle, which, and then going on to the vowel after that. Then we have combinations which bring a plosive immediately followed by a fricative. So again, the beginning of the sound is going to be that momentary kind of explosion, little burst, but then it immediately goes into the fricative consonant, which is going to continue for as long as the breath goes. So here are the affricative consonants. The T followed by sh, sh, becomes ch, like church. There's one at the beginning and at the end. And then the other unvoiced affricative is another T, followed by an S. So you have tss. And the only word I could think of that really starts with that sound, in English anyhow, is the word tsar, if you pronounce it that way. Tsar. Or if it appears in the middle of the word, like in antsy, or at the end of the word bets. Then we have the voiced affricative consonants, starting with a D, and then followed by j. You have j, judge. Again, at the beginning and in the middle of that word, two affricatives. J, j. And then the other is the D followed by the Z. So d, z becomes z, like in guards and kids. Again, I don't think we have any words in English that start with that sound. And finally, we can look at some consonant blends, which are when more than one consonant comes together. And it can happen at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of a word. And you can see this long list, and there are probably many more. Bl, kr, kt, dr, f, etc. You can go through those and experiment and notice which ones are voiced, which ones are unvoiced, and how that energy for those consonants comes from the deepest part of the torso. It comes from those respiratory muscles acting on the breath pressure. And so it's really very fun to explore how all these sounds are made, to work with, again, trying to release any extra tension that comes in, but using the good tensions and that breath pressure in those various spots with the articulators, and experimenting with how much breath it takes to keep that sound going clearly and with freedom, and so that the voice itself is never interfered with, but always given as much support and openness and resonance as possible. Now, one reason why it's important to know whether the consonant you're working with is voiced or unvoiced is because those consonants that are voiced, again, have pitch. So if you're singing, you have to know whether those consonants are going to be lined up with the vowel on the pitch. For example, let's say you have the word blend that you're going to sing. You have to know that the B is actually a voiced consonant. So we can't sing blend, but we have to blend, blend. Think of the B on the pitch that you're entering. And again, at the end of the word, when you have the ND, blend, that D kind of fell off. Blend. Even the D, I want to think, okay, I hear that pitch, and I'm going to put those consonants right on there. And it really helps with ensemble, with a group singing together. Know what the pitch is supposed to be, and then think the consonant on that pitch. And it really helps to unify and to make the words as clear as possible. Another point worth making is that these various consonant sounds are not always spelled the way we would think. For example, the word nose does not have a Z at the end, but the sound that you make is the Z sound. Nose. So bear that in mind as you're coming across various words. And just for fun, look at something that you're reading next time you pick up the newspaper and notice the words and kind of analyze. What are the sounds that make up that word? Not necessarily just how it is spelled, but how it would be spelled in the International Phonetic Alphabet, which describes the way that those sounds are formed. I think it's really interesting and fun to become aware of that, because that's part of your toolkit as a singer. So it's always a good idea to kind of get those articulators going and do some fun vocal warm-ups that involve that movement. One of them, you can just work with the plosives by saying pet cat, or bad, good. And notice you're using all the unvoiced and then the voiced plosives. The unvoiced, pet cat, and then the voiced, bad, good. And you can say that a few times and you kind of wake up all those articulators. And then another exercise you can do to get the facial muscles loosened up and to get in the spirit of singing is to do some gurneying. And they actually have competitions of gurneying, I think in England, where you're just kind of making the weirdest face you can and you move all those muscles around and even involve the tongue a little bit. move everything around and play with loosening everything up. All right, and once you've worked with those plosives, then you can speak through the fricatives. Do them in pairs from the unvoiced to the voiced. That H is a great release, isn't it? It's like a big sigh. Then, of course, speak right through those nasals and work to find all that great resonance up and down in the chest and up in the head. All three of the nasals, and then go throughout the range. And then the N. And then the ENG or the eng. Those are great vocal warm-ups in addition to waking up the articulators. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this quick little tour through the consonants, and I look forward to meeting with you again soon. Thanks so much for being here. Bye-bye.